Hello, good afternoon. I don't know if you all know me. Let me introduce myself. I'm Gustavo Martínez, and I work at GeneXus, the reporting, data reporting analysis, and that's what we are going to be talking about in this part of the course. The question of decision making. As you know, decision making is quite a complex issue in the business area. Any good decision must be based on data. Now, data at present produce many data, but before they can be used for analysis, they must be processed and presented in a clear way so that they are meaningful to us. Therefore, we have to convert this data into information. In GeneXus version 16, we introduce the object called data, and we are supported. It gives us support for this type of work. A dashboard, to define it, is a graphic representation where we put in the main business indicators in a summarized and orderly manner. A dashboard must also have some kind of interactivity to be able to vary the analysis perspective and be able to see data from different angles. The purpose, the goal, is going to see either how well my business is evolving or to have the necessary information to comply with the business goals. The dashboard object in GeneXus has these main features. It is based on components, therefore it's component-based. We have a funnel with a specific behavior, for instance, queries to specify data, filters to choose a value, and we have text, we have images. It's declarative. That means I don't have to, I just have to drag components. It's live edition. So as I build my dashboard, I'm going to see how what it's going to be like, and if the connection to the database is well configured, I can see how the dashboard is going to be looking like. It's also it's not an executable object. I need a user control, and this dashboard control is the user control is what we call the dashboard viewer control. As it happened with any new objects, not extremely new because it's been working for a year now, but we are going to be working on the KB of this event, showing you things from previous events, and we're going to look into the various features that we've added along the years. The dashboard I can show you is this one. We have a central area with data and a filter area by track, by speaker. And these filters allow me to vary the perspectives, to change them. Then I have statistics where I can see certain totals like the number of tracks and sessions and speakers. Then I have a pie graphic where I can see the sessions by different analysis, by date or by flow, whether there is a streaming or the language of the lectures. There is also a graph where you can see a rank of the favorite best 10 talks as indicated by users in the app. And then lastly is the user distribution by country and by the type of device they use. Now, filters that you see at the top are global filters. The dashboard object has a global filters, so when I change that filter, that event is going to be distributed to all the components of the dashboard, but only those that are related with that filter are the ones that are going to be updated. Now, in this case, these are all the components related to sessions where you find information about the sessions. What I'm doing here is I'm varying the tracks, and I can see the sessions of that track, or I can change the date, and I can see the various sessions on a certain date. If I go into statistics, now I can show you the totals. When I click on any of those totals, I can see a list of the details about the tracks or the sessions. And here, even if I click on a specific session, down below I can see the speakers. And the same thing happens with the other totals. I'm seeing here the list of speakers. If I move down, in the graph I showed you about the favorite, you see a feature of the dashboard object. It means that you can use a consultation as if it is a filter. So if I click on any of these conferences, on any of these talks, I'm sorry, here you can see a detail about this talk, but in particular. We're going to see it as to see how I'll show you how we build all the dashboard at GeneXus. Now, how do we do this? Before version 16, you could have a dashboard as the one I showed you using the query. But to do it in that way, you have to put in lots of codes and chain the components and so on. In GeneXus 16, we introduced the object called dashboard to be able to have a higher productivity in this type of constructions. Now, the only thing we have to do is to go to the GeneXus dialog, select the object, then we find dashboard, and then drag components to the screen and declare the relations among those components. Relations in the dashboard object are done through the names. All consultations have parameters and filters have a name. Therefore, when I modify a filter, if there is a consultation that has a parameter that is called exactly the same as the filter, that consultation is going to be refreshed. And another one with a parameter that has a different name won't do it. The editor in the dashboard object is always supporting us during the entire edition. So if I add a consultation that has parameters, then the necessary filters for those parameters will be added. If I click on a component, it will show me the components related to it. And that's very useful when I'm building large dashboards and I can get lost in the relations among the components. And as I said, this is live edition. I don't have to execute the application. I can see the application in the editor itself. Let's go into GeneXus now and let's see how we can design it. As I said, in the first place, in reporting, we get dashboard and we select, we have the central area for queries. We can drag the first of these consultations, which is the statistics. And here you can see that the consultation is done, and you're going to see the various data when it's in execution. You can configure certain things. You can put a frame, you can put a title, and then you will drag the various consultations, which are the various queries. And these are the same 4 queries with the same parameters. And when you add the first one, by generating an SQL sentence, this would create the filters and to recover those filters in the database. You execute the query, you create the filters, and when you add the following queries, since they have the same parameters, no new filters are going to be created, but they're going to be linked to the ones created for the first time when the first query was made. And here we are clicking on some of the graphs, and you can see the filters, how they are marked. They're marked as related. And if we click on the filters, then you'll see what objects are having an impact by the change in the filters. For instance, in the first one, there are no parameters, and so it doesn't change. Let's move now into the configuration of these queries. For each one of them, we will set a frame, a title, but the properties that we may set are quite a few. And this refers to the type of output we'd like to have, whether it's a graph, as in this case, but it could be a table. If it's a graph, then we can change the type of graph directly in the dashboard without meddling with the original query. Now, if you recall, filters in our example were at the top, and here they are at the side. So if we click up there where it says layout, you will see the properties of the layout, and the property called position of filters. We will select it, and then the filters will be changed for the top part. As you can see, every touch in properties is shown in the screen of the editor, and you can see how it's going to look, what it's going to look like. Let's configure filters. These filters are created as dynamic combos, and so I have to have an attribute to take the ID, to have the IDB, and the other one for descriptions. Perhaps the attribute for descriptions is incorrect, as in the case of the first filter, so I can go and change it. I can also decide that I want a value that is null, so that once it's valued, the filter doesn't apply. And I can also change the text. The text of such value, in this case, I put goal. And then, as you can see, I go on clicking on the filters. I go on having the queries marked below. We're now moving on to more queries. This is the part of favorites. And this is what comes next. I'm going to make some room, first of all, and then I'm going to make the drag and drop of the query with a total of favorites. It's this one. And down below, you have the table in the console, the query that sums up the sessions in detail. We have frame, a title, collapse, and we add the table. Now, this table, as you can see in the data from a session, has a sealer stamp in ID that can be added as a parameter. So up there, we have a fifth filter, which is linked to this query. Now, that's not what I've shown you. What I wanted you to see was that to use the graph that is above all that to filter the table that's below. So what I'm doing here, and you can see it as if they were related. So what I do is I would erase this, I would delete this filter. I delete it, and then I go to the graph, I mark it, and under properties only template, I would select apply filters. In this case, the ID stamp is going to be a parameter to filter from the one below. It's showing here what is the type of consultation. It depends on the four fields below, but it also has an impact on the object that is below them. Let's see whether this works. As I said, this is a live edition, so my behavior and distribution can be seen in the editor. What I'm doing now is that I am selecting the conferences in the graph, and the data are updated in the table below. The last thing to see then was to add graphs in a pie showing the user distribution by country and by device. Therefore, I can configure a frame and a title for both. Very well. Here I've got part of the dashboard, large part of the dashboard I've shown you. What we still have to do, I mean, as I said, this is a presentation of the information, but to execute this dashboard, I must use the user dashboard viewer control. I would go to the dashboard. I would select web panel, and then in a toolbox, I will try and find among the controls the control dashboard viewer, and I would drag it to the screen. Now, there's a property to this screen, which is called object, which is the link between this control and the dashboard I created in the previous step. This is what's missing. When you go F5, and you execute this web panel, then you're going to have the dashboard in runtime working. But we're going to have more interactivity. The dashboard I showed you, I had the details, as you see here. If I select the total number of tracks, I can see the list, the total of speakers. I check with a list. In general, I do this in GeneXus. What I'm going to do now then is to try and make use of the event in the good time. That's one of the dashboard viewers elements. And in the web panel, if I go back to the events, I'm going to see the web panel for the event build click. Once you make this event, you execute this event, there is a variable that's related to this event click data containing specific information about the event. For instance, what query was clicked on, what element on that query, what's the value of the click. So I'm going to use SSDT as a variable to make a case. If the element was tracked, then I would show the query of tracked records. If it's sessions, I would show the detail about sessions, and so on and so forth. The events that we've got in the dashboard viewer are 3 at present. We have filter change, which is triggered the moment you change a filter. Then we have item click at the time of the query, and values highlighted. That's when you highlight the value of a certain query with a certain behavior that's been configured. Then, as I said, each event you set a variable, an SDT, containing specific information about one of the events. There is also more general information, such as all the filters, what the values they have, so that we can use that information in our programming, and depending on that, we can do one thing or the other. Now, what is there? What else is there? Let's look at parameters now. Let's suppose that in this dashboard, filters started all with nil values. But let's suppose that we want the dashboard to start with filters at a certain value. How can we do that? We would define parameters. These values are going to be given from the outside. So you go to the dashboard, and in the tab of parameters, here, we define a parameter for each one of the filters, which were 4: track ID, session date, the room, and speaker ID. And so what we do is we use these parameters. We go to each one of the filters in the property called value, which is null here. We would put in each one of these parameters. We've defined them, and the only thing is to call them, to use them. Now, invocation is done through the web panel. It's still defining the parameters here. On the web panel, here, what we do is delete the object property, which we had linked it to it, because this has to be done by code. And in the code, in the refresh event, we'll use the same property. We'll write dashboard viewer dot object is equal to the name of the dashboard I'm going to associate it with. In this case, it's dashboard 1. And when I open parentheses, GeneXus will show me the list of the parameters with the name and the type of data of each one of them. And there I can use variables or fixed values, such as in this case, which I'm sharing. I'm giving it constant values for each one of them. What else? There are methods as well. In this example, you can see, and most certainly we'll want to manage our dashboard from the outside, from abroad. Let's look at these examples. I'm going to add 2 examples, one to obtain the value of the filter, to read it, and the other one to set the value of the filter. So in my web panel, I use these 2 buttons, and I'm going to program the code for these buttons. Now, this in the first code, you have the first filter value, and I'm going to call it I'm going to call the message command. I'm going to have for the second one the set filter value going from the name of the filter and a fixed value. In this case, it was 5. This is the way you see it when it's executed. I change the value of the filter, but once I click on the button, I'm obtaining the ID of that filter, always. Now with the second button now, any value that you put in the filter is always going to go back to general analyst because that's description according to value 5. The methods in dashboard viewer are these ones. We have the refresh method, which allows us to refresh, update the values for filters. We also have methods for filters and also methods to set the values of filters. There is over a meter because we have value, range, and collection. There are different types of parameters. Let's add, what about other interesting stuff? I've shown you that. Remember when we were seeing the list of sessions? In this case, I would like to make click on the first column. I can see the speakers below, not here, because you see that when I put the mouse on top, it doesn't change. It doesn't become a hand. I'm using this property, right system event, which is a property that was added at the time of the consultation. When this is by default in true, then the event is triggered in GUID. When you click on any of the elements, you may wish this element to be highlighted, and this is good for tables or graphs. And I'm doing this with allowed selection property of the query viewer. When I click on a conference, for instance, I'll show in the speakers down below. So that part of the code will require to have the IDE of the conference. However, as it happens with all IDEs, I'm not going to show it on screen. I wouldn't like it to be seen. Neither would I want it to stop here. I do this through the visible property at the level of the query element. So an element that is marked visible, for instance, is never going to be seen, but its value is going to be available in the event so that you can obtain the value. Now, what other things are there in relation to reporting that we've added since the last event? Well, these weren't shown in the example, but we have a full GIT data type support. We have to define the type of parameters or a dashboard to issue filters. Something that have also been asked quite a lot is to use the IVIS function. We can also use not only queries, but also data providers using any type of lung problems. We also introduced main color at the level of query viewer and dashboard viewer to be able to change the color scheme through just one property. So this is basically what I wanted to share with you. I'm open to any questions. I think there is some time for questions, isn't there? Well, a couple of minutes. Otherwise, during the practical, you have time to ask questions as well. Any questions? Yes, over there, please. I would like to know how you are composing the query of statistics, which was like 5 queries, but you dragged only one. How did I make the query, you mean? Yes. Well, I put in, I assume the tracks attribute, count, tracking D, of the other one as well. And there's a detail that I haven't shown you, but the query object always tries to show in the select and gather everything as accurate as possible. I would like those data to be unlikely to be shared with someone else, and they would join it and work with another item. And there is also a calculation group where the elements that have the same group name will go together. So I put in different names into each one of the indicators, and it indicated them always completely different. Since it's a count, it's a number, just a number. Well, it gathers everything with a cross joint, and since it's just a number, it doesn't matter. So it would and you give select, and that's it. But then what about the click when you want to show the detail? How do you know what the name of the group is? Well, every element has its own, and so I put in a name, a specific name. According to that name is the one that's going to serve me to ask at the time of the query. Anything else? I've got a query. Since queries are complex and take a long time, perhaps we could you tell us if we can use another database? Can the query target any other data source and gather statistics? When the consultation, let's see, you can target another database, the same structure with your data, or you can put no data at all in the configuration. And once the configuration is set in the database, the editor is going to show you invented data. They're going to show you something like 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and you'll see how it's been written, but data are false.